for taking the time out to chat with us, just to explore different ideas. So we get to learn about your perspective and your story and your journey and what you do and why you stand for it. And hopefully, by means of this interview, we'll be able to tease out some of the themes, be able to find some points of inspiration and learning for going forward for people who are interested in practicing with purpose on this planet. So, first question, please introduce yourself to our audience and please tell us more about how Selyn started. I realized you were an attorney when you by profession, and what made you move into starting your own enterprise, starting Selyn, and what's your purpose?
So thanks, Pavid. Thanks to Moral Fairground for having us. It's really exciting to talk to you guys. So, okay, so where do we start? My name is Selena Peiris. I head business development at Selyn. So we are a 30-year-old company in Sri Lanka, and actually, Pavid, it was my mother who founded it. So I'm the second generation leader of the company. So the name Selyn came after I was born. The story goes that my mother was actually breastfeeding me when my dad asked, "What name do you want for your company?" And she just said Selyn. So there we go. That's the amount of market research that went into this. But fast forward all these years, we are what we started with 15 women in my mother's home garage is now an enterprise, one of the largest social enterprises in Sri Lanka. We have in our network over 1,000 artisans. We are primarily in the handloom sector of the country, which is one of the biggest or the most successful sectors within the traditional crafts of Sri Lanka. And with my coming into the business, we have also looked at the rest of the craft industry, the other materials, the other techniques, and the other skills that we can bring in. And in this way, we work very much in all the provinces of the country, largely in the northwestern and the western provinces. So what's really special about Selyn is that not only do we weave beautiful cloth or create beautiful product, which ranges from home items to toys, which we export all around the world. What's really special is that at the core of what we do is this kind of commitment and dedication to uplift the living standards of the women we work with. So we choose to do this in two ways. So one is that we give them access to work. So the women that we work with are rural women who are really unable to find work if they have to also balance their personal lives. So they are either, they have kids, they can be single moms, they have parents at home, they are in rural villages, their husband might not want them to come to work. So, they can't really access mainstream work. So the first point of giving access to work, what we do is we create an environment which enables them to get this job. So flexi time, flexible working hours, work from home, take your work home, and all these various working models that we have, which the woman can then choose so that she can balance her personal life with her work, right? So we have instances where a mother would drop her child off in school and then she would work for a couple of hours in our factory, pick up her child and then go back home with her work. So what we do at Selyn is primarily two things. Within our ethos is the whole idea that we need to give access for women to work. And then we need to give women the skills to stay at work, because those are two very different things, right? The women who work with us are largely those unable to really find work in the mainstream workforce. So they are involved in the informal sector of the country, or they do home entrepreneurship work, but not really enough to, or consistent enough to be contributing in a consistent manner into their household. And that's a problem, because in that way you can't really say a woman is empowered, because she doesn't have the necessary infrastructure to really support her. So when we say access to work, we give her a job. We not only give her a job, within the organization are the structures, the flexible working times, the kind of all the structures that enables her to stay at her job. So for instance, we have women who are working from home. We have women who are working from in managing groups in their own homes. We have women who are working part-time with us. They would drop their kid off in school, come to work in the factory for a couple of hours, and then take the work and go back home, right? And then we also have the 8 to 5 kind of factory setting as well. But this is the way that we really ensure that they can stay, they can access work, because it's very important. Because if we don't allow this kind of working operational model, it's not possible for these women to really have access to a consistent way of mode of income, right? But then we go beyond that, because we believe that just because they have a job, even if it's in this flexible manner, if we don't give them the skills to stay at work, that too will finally affect their empowerment and the ability to make their own choices, right? To be in control of the choices they make. So from health related services to looking at their mental health, looking at the kind of financial literacy aspect of it, uh, from looking at their leadership, their personality development. We look at all those various aspects that will really enable a woman to, like, what I kind of, my favorite saying is, enable a woman to be in charge of the choices she makes and the ability to say no. Because when you're in a position where everything is on your shoulders, when society kind of is working in a way that you have to do whatever it takes to feed your family, it's so important that they get the chance to say no. So that is why at Selyn we have created this working model that really enables them to kind of, make the best out of the situations they might be in. So I hope that's a good enough answer to your question.
Oh yes, absolutely. It's a very interesting space to think through and think about, because context really matters in such cases. And being from an Indian background, I sort of understand the informal sector and the informal working environments. For those who haven't heard of it, who are going to listen to this video and an interview, sectors like street vendors, um, you have all kinds of services provided, and those form the informal sector. And what happens is a lot of people in the informal sector find it extremely hard, because there's no assurance of the job security, so to speak. There's no concrete structures within the taxation system and policies from the government that enable this sector as a formal sector. That's why we named it as a formal sector. So to touch on that, and also the cultural aspect of things, where women are supposed to, or looked after, looked at in a way that they're supposed to be taking care of their family. They're the breadwinners, and then so you got to take care of the kids, you got to go out. All these demographical and societal constructs completely change the way empowerment works, doesn't it? So that said, what led you to, or what method did you use to sort of tackle these problems, or what is, run me through the thinking process around how to solve this?
Yeah. So, yeah, of course. So it's based on what I said earlier as well. So obviously, to start with, we follow the fair trade principles, right? So I think it's a very good guide for organizations to structure themselves, to structure their operations in a way that does no harm, I think, to people and planet. And I think so that is a good basis to start on. So when you look at the context, like you said, the Sri Lankan women, like what we realized is, like you very correctly said, a lot of these women fall into the informal sector. And for instance, when crisis happens, like with the COVID pandemic, it's the informal sector that gets hit the first, right? And there is no social security, there is no safety net. And it becomes a really big problem in Sri Lanka, especially because one of the biggest issues in the rural parts of Sri Lanka is what we call the debt trap, where women have no or access to kind of the legitimate financial institutions, but in fact borrow from loan sharks and small kind of organizations which charge them like 40% interest a year, like like crazy amounts to for the loan they take. So then what happens is that when so these women, like in this context, what we've heard now, especially after with this COVID pandemic, is that the loan sharks are now knocking at their doors, right? So these women and men in the informal sector are in such a vulnerable position. How do they continue their livelihood? So these are the dangers of this informal sector that we are trying to that we are in. The craft sector of the craft sector of Sri Lanka is in, and that we are an active role that we play an active role with, right? So at Selyn, I think it was a very, very gradual process. So my mother also comes from a difficult background, if I would say. She's had a difficult childhood. Even though they were a big family in my town, they didn't really have a lot of cash and money in hand. So she came up in the world in a very, very hard way. And I think that's what has influenced, like that is the basis of this company, because it's like the first. So she's a lawyer by profession, but she realized very fast that she that just empowering herself is not enough, because there's so many other women in this country that need this help, right? Because she was lucky enough to escape the kind of trap that life had set out for her, and she was lucky enough to get out of it. So what could she do? And that's when Celine really started. So we didn't realize we were a social enterprise. We didn't realize we were a fair trade company, right? It was just my mom trying to do the right thing. And that's really what it's all about, right? Finally, at the core of what we do, it's about doing the right thing. So, so, so I think mindset matters. That's what I'm trying to get at. Uh, to solve problems, to identify that there are problems, mindset matters and leadership matters. Because without that correct understanding and without leadership, I think you can structure and you can, come up with these various models that are very excellent on paper, but without that leadership and mindset, I think it can get very, very challenging to grow a social enterprise, and also to kind of scale, and to also make it last. So that is something that I think we have to really acknowledge. And then going beyond that, we started again a very, very gradual process. Young girls joined my mother to when she started her business. Then they got married, then they had kids, and then they could no longer come to work. And then my mom started giving them work to take home. And then it was this realization, like the company is built on a true realization that these are the steps that we need to take if we want to keep these women at work. So it's like one step to the next step to the next step. Then came the childcare, the need for childcare. Then we've set up kind of childcare units in some of our plants. So it's a very, very gradual journey in a woman's life, I think, which came with my mother, a woman, and having these needs in her life. And she created this model which enabled her to meet her own needs and with the realization that she needed to do the same for the people she works with. So that's really how the Selyn model has grown. And of course, like 10, 20 years later, especially with my coming into the business, we realized that this was a social enterprise. We realized that the fair trade, that we were following fair trade principles, and that's when we went out and reached out to these formal networks and got recognized for what we do. But it's a very organic story, Pavit, and I think that's the beauty of it. And that's, I mean, I am very, very privileged to be in a position to be able to carry on her vision, right? And to really like start to kind of create that difference on the ground.
Oh, absolutely wonderful. You even touched on so many interesting talking points through what you said. And there's something absolutely powerful about having lived experience of certain issues and fundamental problems. And going forward, you realize how important it is to extend that privilege you acquire eventually to all these other people who are in need of it. And I think that's the beauty of wanting to be a social entrepreneur, wanting to practice with purpose. The idea of purpose is so important that it should be ingrained in every business going forward.
Absolutely.
But on that note, you mentioned fair trade and social enterprise and how you went out, looked at the networks and formalized it. Because like you said, the first point of movement and change is actually the intention to do so. But in terms of finding the right balance, finding the right structure that worked for you, so the fair trade model itself, what what process did you go through to figure out this is the model that I want to follow, or this is the kind of company setup that I want to follow? Because there are some companies that move into the not-for-profit space as opposed to being a social enterprise, and vice versa. So it just works out so differently. But what is your story?
Yeah, so interesting question. So we are registered as a private limited company. We are by law a profit-making limited liability company. So, and personally, and I think we have hindsight on our side, but personally, I'm a strong believer that that is the private limited for-profit kind of company structure really enables a business to grow, right? Because finally, that's where the sustainability comes. Because yes, you have a social mission, yes, you have an environmental mission, but if you don't have a business that's sustainable, not profitable, then then you need to look at a not-for-profit kind of structure. So what a for-profit structure enables us to do is it enables us to be to have the system, or to enable it enables us to have this thinking that everything that we do has to be sustainable. So if we design a product, it needs to sell. If the cost of that product is too high, we need to um, tweak the designs in order to meet the target price. How do we go about finding customers? We can't wait for customers to come to us. We need to have the correct kind of systems, look at data, look at sales reports. We need to have all these mechanisms and business kind of practices, good business practices in our company if we are to be a sustainable business. And when I say sustainable business, I mean a business that can actually have a bottom line that's plus at the end of the year, right? Because if we don't have a system doing that, then everything else that I do kind of can't be taken forward. Like if there's a year that I don't make profit, or in a situation that we go into kind of bankruptcy or towards that area, like then how can I serve my people? So that's the very small basic logic, like run a good business, and good in every sense, for people, for planet, and make profit. And it's totally doable, Pavit. I mean, it's just a matter of being creative. It's a matter of being innovative. It's a matter of being agile. It's a matter of understanding your markets. It's a matter of using all the good and like successful kind of business practices and stories out there, but just understanding that profit is not the only thing you care about. You know, your people and your planet matter. So it's a triple bottom line, and that's it. You know, you can't go away from that. There is no way that you can like sacrifice one for the other, you know. But it's possible through, so a very good example, Pavit, if I may, is during the COVID kind of situation when Sri Lanka just went into lockdown in March. We were wondering, oh my God, what on earth do we do? We are a luxury, luxury product for all terms and like for all purposes, right? Like we make beautiful like fashion in Sri Lanka. We make these exclusive toys that are sent around the world. We are in no way essential, right? So how on earth do we last this pandemic? And you know, my mother put down the law as our chairman and said, no one leaves the company. No one in this company is to be laid off or leaves on account of this crisis. So then, and she said, look, you know, guys, I've hired you to figure this out. Like, figure it out. How are you going to protect these three things that we care about, right? So then what we did at the start was that when we were pushed to the corner, we thought, okay, now we need to get into the essential sector. What can fabric do? And we started making fabric masks. And the fabric masks have really, really enabled us to have this, the cash flow needed to last till today, right? And what's amazing about it is, so and then as a social enterprise, we realized, okay, profit here didn't matter. We were going to take that hit. The company will take that hit. So all we were doing was income meets expenses. So that's it. So these are like the business techniques that we have used to survive the pandemic. So this is a very good example of how a social enterprise, continuing to be a social enterprise, can even last one of the biggest kind of pandemics this world has ever seen, right? So totally doable. Like I'm a very, very strong advocate for the for-profit business model within the social enterprise sector.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. And it's so inspiring to see how you've reinvented what you normally do and adapted so quickly in order to continue sustaining and continue sharing your impact with the communities around you. And while also thinking about, say, environmental impact, looking at making fabric masks, because that's something that actually
Exactly.
was one of the biggest problems with the onset of the pandemic, where if we all constantly use disposable masks, we don't have a way to safely control and recycle PPE. So good on you. Very, very, very happy to hear that your company sustained and you've continued to take care of all the people and enable them and continue to enable them. So just off on that note, on the topic of COVID, so what sort of ideation, what sort of support did you receive outside your business? So say from the legislation or in Sri Lanka in general, what were the kinds of support mechanisms that other social enterprises may have taken in order to sustain through the pandemic?
Yeah. So, Pavit, in Sri Lanka, there's no official recognition of social enterprises. So whatever we received were what the SME sector received. And these range from loan moratoriums to kind of working capital loans at a 4% interest. And that's it, basically. So financially, we were given those two kind of reliefs by the government. But then we had to kind of fend for ourselves, right? So of course, the working capital loans helped. And I have to say here, when so it's not just about Selyn, but it's also about the entire SME sector. Like I know for a fact that smaller SMEs were not able to access these loans, and because of that, actually some of the smaller business, the startups have gone out of business and creating a lot of volatility at ground level. So these are concerns and these are challenges for Sri Lanka going ahead, most certainly. So institutional support wise, Pavit, that was kind of it. But we had a big support, I think, from the Fair Trade network, like especially the Fair Trade Asia network. They're the ones who put out the idea of the face masks, you know, and just gave us that confidence at that time to say, yes, you guys can do it, because that we really needed that at that time. Even though we knew at the back of our head we could do this, just saying, actually, guys, you can do this really mattered. So I think that support from the World Fair Trade Organization, the support from our buyers, our fair trade buyers around the world was really like unbelievable. Again, sustainable, right? Because it was through trade that we overcame this crisis. It wasn't through handouts. It wasn't through grants. I mean, the Selyn story, I'm glad, is still in the positive and in the success story side, but we have to be aware that there are so many small businesses out there who haven't had that luck, and that there is a systemic problem, there is an institutional kind of gap that needs to be filled, if more SMEs and the others can also kind of survive periods of crisis in this manner, you know. And I'm sure it might be even the same in Australia. I mean, a lot of small businesses have gone out of business, right? So I think that's something really, really we need to look at. Like, how do we go ahead? Because crisis is going to be our future. You know, we are going to have periodic lockdowns, I think, forever, at least in our lifetime. So how do government and institutions get ready for this is a very good question. And also, as fair traders, how do we get ready for this? How do we make our own organizations more agile? How do we make our own structures kind of more flexible? You know, especially when we're in the craft sector, like, even though working from home is inherent to it, communication during crisis became a big problem because a lot of people didn't have access to mobiles, a lot of people don't have access to the internet. I mean, these are women at artisan level, right? So what do we have as companies, fair traders, have to do to ensure that our network is connected during crisis? These are all things, Pavit, that have come to light, and questions that we have to seriously ask ourselves.
Very true. It is so topical, all these problems that suddenly arise out of nowhere, and probably something you wouldn't have ever had to think about had there been no pandemic, or like you said, it is the arguably one of the greatest crises in our lifetimes, at least.
Yeah.
And hopefully, like you said, we will get out of it and adapt to it eventually, but it's only a matter of time. And I think that more agile we are, the more proactive, less
Exactly.
reactive, that's what will help. That is so good. The networks, though, what you said about being able to connect and communicate with the networks. What are the sort of initiatives that you put in place with the communities that you work in to give that sort of network effect? So, for example, if there's somebody working in your organization and they are from one part of Sri Lanka and potentially have a certain network of people that might have some sort of connection with you to help you, and you help them, that mutually respectful relationship. What kinds of impactful networks have you sort of thought of, or are you working on already, um,
Yeah.
to enable more people?
Yeah. So one thing, Pavit, is that when obviously the producer groups. So with the face mask coming in, we were really able to keep a lot of the even the very, very, very small units. We were able to give them work, right? So when it comes to the producer side of it, we are constantly like looking for orders, looking for small orders that we can give outside. Like, so it's not just about having our factory running full capacity at this time, but so it was a very sales and marketing responsibility to go out there and really look for those little orders, taking into mind our production capacity issues, you know. So it wasn't about, oh, let's just get any order, but like very, very targeted kind of thinking into getting our people more work, because that's finally, Pavit, that's the bottom line, right? Like right now, the biggest issue for the people, I think, across the world, especially, I mean, the women that I work with, the networks and the communities that we are in, they need income. I mean, their husbands have lost job because it's probably they were also in the informal sector. You know, construction projects have closed, tourism is zero. I mean, people need income. And bottom line, as responsible business, what we need to do is to give them work. And of course, when we give them work, we need to ensure that they are paid well, that we give them consistent work, you know, and it's a big responsibility at this moment to kind of keep being a fair trader, right? But that's something, a responsibility that we take really, really, really seriously. And something else that we were supposed to do for Christmas, which would have been really, really great, but unfortunately the second wave has hit in Sri Lanka and we are now back in lockdown. But to open our shops and our online shops to other brands. uh, so anyway, at Selyn, especially during the Christmas time, we have this nice market inside the shop, and we get all kinds of ethical and sustainable brands to come in and sell. And we have this amazing day that, you know, where people can come in and buy something ethical and sustainable for their whole family. So we were hoping to do this at a grand scale and run several of these events. So having crafts from all around the island, craftsmen having their product in the shop, other brands coming in, and really trying to create a platform for people to sell their product. Because especially if you're a smaller SME, if you're a small home business owner, you don't have the platform that Selyn has managed to build in the last 30 years. So we really wanted to open our doors and enable this at a larger scale than we usually do. Unfortunately, COVID has hit. So right now we're trying to think of how we can do kind of virtual fairs, how we can bring these things to light virtually. But I have to say that it's been a challenge. It is a challenge because we make plans and then everything changes, right? And then we make other plans. And but these are the kind of things that we thought we like, the business thinking that has gone into solving kind of the problems that we have today. And Pavit, like at Selyn, like that's what we do. Like every problem that comes to out, we think of a business solution. Like that's how we are geared to like think. So everything we do is about a sustainable business solution, you know. Unfortunately for us, like we can't, like our minds work that way, fortunately, unfortunately. So that's the kind of approach that we have taken during the crisis.
Wonderful. It is absolutely relevant and true, because like you said, while our minds work that way, it's because of so many factors that have affected the markets for so many years. The last, century, if you look back and look at how we've projectively grown into a very technologically advanced, so to speak, um, civilization for now, it's because of how our markets work. So there have been big benefits, no doubt. It's good to acknowledge that. But it's also important to identify that there have been so many drawbacks because the focus has been narrowed so much on profits alone. And I think organizations like yours, practicing with purpose, asserting to the public that, look, it is absolutely possible and you can be extremely successful while addressing the triple bottom line, not just profits. Um, and it's fantastic. It's so inspiring to actually even be able to learn so much from you by means of this interview. One of the things I wanted to ask you, and this is probably going to be towards the final bits of the interview, where I'm wanting to understand, now that understanding that Selyn has grown into such an influential power in terms of really showcasing, exemplifying that, look, we can do anything we want as long as we put our minds to it, as long as there's a clean intention around it. You can do profits, purpose, and support the environment as well. What sort of influence do you resonate with, and what sort of influence do you share across within Sri Lanka itself, or even at a global level? Because successful examples of social enterprises exist, except that scalability of social enterprises is often critiqued, saying that you spend too much time doing other things. But that's I think a function of the societal constructs and the view on the markets. So how do you break that norm, and how do you push forward and influence other people to follow this path?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, Pavit. And you're right. Like, since this positive kind of COVID example, like we've had a lot of exposure in the sense that people have started to realize, actually, like you said, you can do all of this. It's just a matter of, I think, first identifying the problem and identifying the correct problem. I think that's where, like, a lot of companies take it easy almost, like they don't, so they have a sustainability arm, which is thinking that the company needs to be sustainable. But what does it really mean for their people if the company is sustainable? That's very, like, it's a different way of thinking of the same problem. So I think that is crucial, like going ahead. Selyn, by example, and myself, having been, because of my previous work experience and also my kind of networks in both the policy space and in the government, like we are really trying to showcase that, look, first understand the problem, take a step, deep breath. That's where research comes into play, data come into play. Let's look at this scientifically, but don't forget that you're impacting humans. So Selyn engages in a lot of similar activities. Talking, we expose, we allow people to come see our factories. We are really open and we are really transparent about what we do, simply because we believe that in that transparency, people will learn from us, right? Because so that's another, just because we have a successful model doesn't mean that we can keep it to ourselves and just kind of show the world, oh, that we have a successful model. Like, that's not the point, right? Absolutely not. And I think in my years with Selyn, going ahead, like, um, really taking this as a case study and to seeing how we can, like you said, influence and enable or inspire others is going to be like a huge part of our journey. So other than that, so there's the whole kind of Selyn being used as a business model as well. And on top of that, like we try to, we push forward the whole idea of collaboration, Pavit. So on top of like what you spoke about, we are a huge proponent of the fact that the world is going ahead. Collaboration is the new competition. You cannot work alone, you cannot work in silos, you have to work with your competitors, and it's only through that spirit of collaboration and transformative kind of leadership ability that we are all going to be able to see the win-win in every situation. And when we can see that win-win in every situation, surely, the people who work for us, the planet, we will have, it's a win-win for all. And that spirit is very essential, I think. And that's something, again, that we try to kind of live by example. So that's one of the things, is collaborating, like I said, opening our stores to similar brands, to competitive products, to, it doesn't matter. Like for us, we believe that it's a win-win situation. It just makes the pie bigger for all of us. It's not that we are all eating out of the same pie, you know and it's so important to take that leap of faith, because when you are in a traditional business mindset, you have this fear of competition. But if you can just not be afraid and embrace it and collaborate with it, wonders, like we can do beautiful things. And I'm not just talking here, like, without having done these things, and not just trying to inspire with my words, but we have so many instances where we have done that. We have collaborated with our competitors, and it has come out to be like such a win-win situation for everyone. And another thing, Pavit, that going ahead, we are going to commit ourselves to do is really be transparent about our supply chain, you know. So of course, Selyn in itself is transparent, but when the product goes to the customer can just see the fair trade label, right? But what can we do beyond that label? How can we really bring that credit, that dignity, and that integrity back to the artisan? So we've just been having conversations about using blockchain technology, like, you know, like cutting edge kind of technology to bring that transparency into our supply chains. Because I think going ahead, there is no way that brands across the world, let alone fair trade brands, can go without that responsibility. We have a responsibility to our consumers. We have a responsibility to our supply chain, to our producers, to create that um, very, very transparent supply chain. So those are the kind of things that using what Selyn has done in the last 30 years, fine-tuning what we have done, acknowledging our failures, acknowledging our shortcomings, and really looking into how we can really inspire kind of other fair traders of our scale, and also those who are starting, and also big business, that, you know, this is possible, you know, like it's totally possible, and it's just a matter of being creative. Like that's really what it boils down to. Never really being satisfied with the status quo, you know. Like when you're pushed to the corner, be creative, and it's in us. It's totally in us. We just need to like push ourselves to that corner, and it's going to come. I strongly believe that. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, no, I mean, yes, of course you did. And an absolutely great message to propagate. And I love how you mentioned that the pie is getting bigger and it's not just us caving into that one pie. Because that is the truth and that is the reality. And competition is good, but it isn't everything. Um,
Exactly.
like
And
you
it's
said,
only if we work together, you know.
yeah,
If we get, we can grow the pie. But if you're all advertising and marketing and to the same pie, then, you know, okay, the pie is the pie. So it's just a shift of mindset.
yeah, absolutely true. And it's very interesting because uh, I read about, I studied about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, did a lot of exercises around it, and did a lot of ideation around it while studying. And what I realized is number 17, the goal number 17, um, which talks about building meaningful partnerships and collaboration, is really that underlying strategy to really elevating everybody out of all those structured challenges that have been mentioned in the goals. And that is amazing how you are a proponent of it and how you are propagating all these important messages while continuing to act using the market forces in a
Yes,
very innovative manner, which is it's an absolute great story, and it's a great thing that you're doing. So thank you so much for sharing your story with us. And
absolutely.
as a last final closing comment, what is that one message that you'd like to tell all businesses across, people who want to get into the space, people who have that intention to make a difference but don't know where to start, um, people who think that it's too expensive or too difficult to actually do it? Because I've often considered this, where as a student in my student life, I found that I wanted to practice a very sustainable and ethical livelihood, but everything that I saw was way above my pay grade. So I could not afford a lot of these things. But then I realized that you track your impact and then you realize how much you are going and you measure. So if you had to share that one message, what would it be?
Ah. So, Pavit, no, I think the one message would be that, you know, it's a journey of continuous improvement, and we need to acknowledge that and be true to our failures, you know. I think because I think bigger businesses that are starting up, you know, there's this afraid to fail, like, afraid to try, and then afraid of bad publicity, or whatever, like they're afraid to try and to fail. But I think it's the intention that matters. And if you have a spirit of continuous improvement and the humility to really accept that this is a journey that you will start, but someone else will continue, and God knows who will end, right? But if you can have that humility to accept that this is a journey, and wow, what you need to do now is start, because the world needs change. I think what COVID has shown all of us is that we cannot anymore live the way that we have lived, And yes, it's a huge challenge to the fair trade sector that young students, such as yourself a couple of years ago, couldn't afford the product that we were putting out into the market. So then we have failed, right? So again, exactly, it's the journey. We have started it. And I think the biggest message is to encourage everyone to start. And then we have this journey of continuous improvement. And then who knows? Maybe we'll have a better world to live in. So yeah, that's really what I wanted to say.
What a wonderfully positive message to share. It is true. The world's your oyster, go conquer it. That's one of my favorite, short and sweet ways of saying it. But wonderful. Thank you so much for really extending your time out, your schedule, being able to communicate with us and share your journey, share about Selyn. And a big thank you to your mother also, because without her, Selyn wouldn't have been realized early on 30 years ago. And it's very inspiring that the kind of work that you do, the kind of vision that you see, and keeping that journey going, keeping that fire burning, and being collaborative. That is absolutely amazing. So thank you so much, Selena. It was an
Thank you,
absolute
Pavid. Thanks so much for having me